So looking at the uncertainty, I'll go into different categories that I've seen people go through. One of them is that it's an unknown enemy. It's one of those viruses that it reacts in a particular way. So when it reacts in this way where nobody really knows what's going on, because every single day there's a new way that the symptomology is working with the body. So the feeling of uncertainty with it continues. It's not like, oh, we got it. We know what it is. So now this is the way that the treatment goes. Every day we hear how it's affecting the symptoms for children or young adults or elderly, and keeps moving on in a different way. So that type of unknownness scares people. Also, that they don't know if they're going to get it because somebody's going to talk to them, or is it going to be that they're coughing? Is it airborne? Is it going to be on a surface, and each surface how it's going to affect them? And then we have the comorbidity, which if you have this disease, it might not kill you by itself, but because you have other diseases, such as heart problem or diabetes or any other condition, that this virus will affect that disease, and you might get exacerbated from that disease, or you might really suffer from whatever other disease that you have. They're also confusing information about how it gets into how, the infectiousness of it. How do you get infected? I have people who are so scared of even going to grocery stores. They call me in a panic. And when they come back home, they don't know what to clean and how to clean. Every single grocery store trip has turned into be a 4-hour of disinfecting, taking a shower, taking all their clothes off, washing everything. And then they're exhausted out of that. And then it's like, I don't even want to go outside. They don't know how it would affect them. So what's happening right now is like even a common cold. Like I remember past Wednesday, I had just common cold, like, my throat ache, and then my sinuses. But every single person that I know that are getting regular allergy issues or headaches, now we are all freaked out. Can this be that I got the corona? It's no longer that I just have a common cold. It's no longer, okay, I got a headache. But it's all of the other issues that, scares you. And then if somebody has a toothache, I have clients who are calling me with a panic that I have to go to a dentist, and I can't because I'm afraid of going. First of all, some of the dentists are not even working, but even if I do, even if I have to go because I have accident and I need to go to a hospital, what's going to happen to me? And then responsible for infecting others. This is a huge thing where now, even if somebody has a common cold or has an issue, they're getting very, very afraid of what's going to happen if they are with an elderly, if they are with another friend. Would I be the person who would be infecting them? So they have fear, they have guilt. And it's one of those things where even when they have it, like usually with some diseases, you would imagine people hold shame. But with this one also, because they think they would be the agent of infectiousness, what happens is that they also feel shame. Like if I have it, I need to keep myself away. But also there's an experience of shame that comes with it, which puts them in isolation and loneliness. From the career perspective, there's a lot of people who have to work from home. There's a lack of structure that has happened. They don't have the same structure they used to go and come back. They procrastinate because they're home. The rituals that they had at home is very different than now. The rituals have to get combined with what they had at work. So it's easier to say, I'll do it later. I don't have to get up at a certain point. I don't need to be there. So you see people procrastinating if they don't have to answer to anyone. There's a lack of attention. Their children are yelling, their dog is barking, there's noise around, and it's easy to go and watch TV. It's easier to have a lack of attention because they're also being disrupted. Sometimes when both spouses are working from home, they don't have enough space. Like if they're lucky to have different rooms and different spaces, and somebody else is take care of their children. But if everybody's at home, those types of structures are no longer working, and they have to constantly recreate. In order to recreate these structures and these type of spaces, usually there's a lot of conflict that happens. There's too much togetherness that happens. There's also the concept of losing the job closing businesses or modifying businesses, which is bringing a lot of pressure on people because um, some people's identity for many years has been their job and career. If you take that job away, they don't even know who they are. Like the agency of who they are goes away. They have no idea what to do, especially if they're not younger and if they're like 50s and up. Restarting, going back into business, sometimes it's very hard for them. Many people have had their businesses kind of like lingering and they've been thinking about closing or retiring, and this has become a time where they've been forced into it, almost like, you know, okay, I can't make it anymore, even if I have to open up, such as restaurants. Restaurants usually are operating on the 30% of their profit, and if that 30% it goes away, like they cannot, you know, fill up the place, then half of them are like, why am I even starting again? Because I have to work for nothing. And then for people who have lost their job, finding new jobs in a place that, like in the United States, we have 38 million people who are lost their jobs and they have to go back to the market. So finding jobs in the midst of all of this or opening up their businesses back is really, really not only bringing uncertainty, it's bringing a lot of stress for people. In the midst of this, also, a lot of people are recreating themselves, bringing themselves up into a place that they're looking at how to bring themselves back into a creation, a creativity where, you know, I have one client who amazingly, she left her job as a marketing and she always wanted to be in fashion and she didn't know how to bring herself into fashion. And this was a time that they could actually look into something else for themselves and really be you know, create something that they were. And this was the beauty of I'm trying to get this out of the site. Yeah. So the concept of, I think I need to stop sharing first and then bring you back, because there we go. All right, welcome everyone who's getting just in coming to our presentation. We started the presentation, so happy to have you and join us. And I'm going to admit Shanti again. She got kicked out and she's coming right back in. Okay. Beautiful. So, so I'm going to go back, and we're talking about uncertainty, and this is being recorded. So just for you guys to know. And so we could put it back actually on the side. Okay. Let me first go back to the career part. Okay. Sorry about the technology piece. I'm muting everyone. Yes, okay, thank you. Okay. So we were talking about lack of job and then future finding job. One of the things that I found out is when I'm trying to work with a client to work with them so they can go through the grief of losing their job and calming them down from an anxiety and refocusing them on what they're great at and what is it that they've never thought of that it could support them. And this might be a time that they could really look at and give them the exercises where they can start looking at what is it that they have passion for, what is it that they always wanted to do, what is it, there's some of the resources. I found some of my clients to really start new businesses, new ideas that they've never had before because they were falling into a path that was put in front of them. And that has brought some new joy for them, which is great out of all the stuff that's going on. The other uncertainty has been the loss of income, loss of savings, borrowing money, and which comes, you know, a little bit of shame and guilt with it when they've had to borrow from their family, from their parents or uncles and whomever was there. People are going after governmental aids, and sometimes their governmental aids are not coming as soon as there's a lot of promises, but not necessarily that they're all getting out there. They have a lot of expectations for aids. They get angry when it's not there for them. Some of them don't have access to financial aid because of their circumstances and they can't be there. So you could see that a lot of the people not having access to financial, not paying their rent, not being paying for mortgages, it becomes worse and worse. The concept of not having the ability to be there financially puts the highest level of anxiety. When I work with people who their financial way of life has not changed, they don't have as much anxiety versus the ones that they've been really destroyed on a financial level. It really, really puts a slant on who they are, their identity, and the future. Welcome for everyone else who's coming and joining us. I just wanted everybody to know that we're recording this and we're sharing some of the presentation, and then I love to hear from you. So as you come in, I mute everybody. So going back into the financial conversation, there's also lack of food. The concept of, there's been a lot of line, and I don't know wherever country you guys are. In here, United States, they are creating food banks where people can go and get boxes of food and bring it to themselves. There's a beauty in it where people are helping, everybody's coming together, and there's a beauty in the society. But I've also found my clients who have gone through this, they hold a level of shame and lack of dignity and honor if they've had to do that. Some of them said, I am going to do it because I need to feed my family, but every time I go into this line, I really feel bad about it. So we're dealing as therapists with all of these emotions. We're dealing with need, but also the emotion that comes with this concept of needing that shows up for people, and how for people to get back their dignity and know that they have the right, and how to take care of themselves in the time that they're really needing to take care of themselves, and finding all the resources that they can. There are people who don't have resources at all, and they're looking at their family systems to be able to do that. These are the times also we could see how the neighborhood, their family, their friends come together, even volunteers, even people who don't know each other, come to take care of each other. And so side by side, you're seeing greed, you're seeing upset, and you're seeing love and humanity come together. And sometimes it's taking our clients to from the place of anger and resentment and why me and nobody cares for me, to look at the other side, which there are a lot of humanity coming together and putting their hand together, and how can you connect to this group so that you could be a part of the global concept that is happening and not feeling really isolated. The next one would be the social aspect of it. Relationship with mate. I'm getting a lot of calls from couples that are going through a lot. First of all, their personal space is being taken away. So it's very upsetting for people that have to be cooped up all day. They're not used to this. People were used to being at work, having time for themselves, having time for other people, and will come in for a couple of hours to be together. And now having all of these personal space is too much, and they start fighting with each other. It's hard for them to have that emotional regulation. So there's a lot of anger. One of the studies that I saw is that women are becoming more depressed and are showing their sadness a lot more, and men are showing a lot more of their anger, and they're experiencing more of their anger. So domestic violence has been a lot more calls, a lot more violence at home, and they don't know where to go. So they stay in the same location. They don't have the same resources. They can't even run to their families or friends anymore. So it's the tension goes high, and the abuse is getting higher. The intimacy it's interesting, the intimacy, the love languages, they're all a lot more seeing that the relationships that on the fundamental level were really good and great, they're getting better because they have time together. They're no longer paying attention to 10 different things. They're actually paying attention to each other. But on the level that the relationship was not that great, we're finding more fights because they have time to really disagree with each other. So the ones that have communication, better communication, we're doing well. And the ones that their communication is not healthy, the relationship is really getting worse. Sexuality is interesting because some people at the beginning of the pandemic and having to stay at home, They were having more sex because they were getting bored and they were getting together. But there's also, it dwindled down into a way of their argument got higher, they no longer wanted to be together, or the concept of hunting went away because you were with someone all day. The ratio of pornography, watching pornography for men has gone more, but there's a lot more porn sites that are also being offered free because they think that people are bored. And the other side of it is that people who had infidelity and they were in the extramarital relationships, in these times that they've had to be cooped up in their own marriages and they couldn't go out, these things have come up because people have more access to their mates' computers and cell phones. So there are a lot more of these the affairs are coming out of the closet. So you can imagine it's creating a lot of rage and havoc in the whole system. Also, because they're home together, this concept of division of labor, of who does what, has become an issue because people usually have figured out what they do, and one person used to do everything at home, another person used to be at work, and now that they're together, they're having fights around who's going to, why should I do everything? Why should I go after you and, clean up after you? There's a lot more requests for divorces, not necessarily legally, but actually requests for divorces and separation because of this time, but because of the legal, actually, they're not going to get a divorce. And some people, because of the financial issues, they're not getting a divorce, but the threat of divorce is almost daily in some of these marriages. And then you have also the other group, which they were mating and they weren't married, and now because of the separateness, they have to stay at home on their own and cannot be together. New relationships are getting disturbed because they cannot be going out dating and being together. So it's also affecting in that way. Then the relationship with children, socializing with children. Many of the parents didn't know how to socialize with their own kids, pretty much, because after they would go to work, the kids were at school, they would come in and really spend maybe 1 hour with their kids, then they would eat, and that's it. Now they have a lot of hours with their children, and they're trying to relate in how can I even be with my kid, which they didn't do that before. So the children of different ages are at home, so each child has a different need, and when you're there 24 hours together, it's very hard, not only for the kids, also for the parents to navigate all of this. Each child used to go to their school, be with their peers, so you had different timing for yourself, but now it's very difficult. So it's creating a lot of havoc, it's creating a lot of change that people are not used to, and they don't know what to do. It takes time to learn these new ways of being. And because people are constantly waiting to go back to a past normal, they're only resisting these changes, and it's not helping them that they're going to really figure it out for the future. They're just resisting, waiting for, for the status quo to go back. There's also children, there's the level of connectedness, there's homeschooling. Parents don't really know how to, they really have no clue in how to, I'm going to mute everybody. There you go. They don't know how to school their children. The way they learn math is very different than their child is learning math. So they're sitting there going like, I have no idea what to do because I don't know how to teach these. I don't even know these things. So they get into a fight because they start fighting with the kid, and the kid is getting upset because their environment changed. It's like, it's not my fault. I don't know what to do. They don't think they're learning. I've done a lot of interviews with kids, and they're like, they don't even think they're learning. The teachers are fed up. They're really, they were used to teaching in a particular way, and now they have to completely teach another way, and they don't know how to do it. So they're finding new ways, but this type of a change is really, really putting a lot of toll and stress on people in every way. Now, their teachers are also at home. They're home. They're trying to handle their life. Plus, they're working on Zoom with every other child. So it's really created a lot of disruption. Children's socialization, again, so many of the kids had their own socialization and they had their own group. So now they're all home, and they can't socialize with their friends. They do a little bit of this type of a Zoom party, but ultimately they come back to their family. There's not really a lot of activity. They can go walk, but that's pretty much all we tell our clients. Do what you can do at the nature so that your children have some activity and they can release some of the energy that they have. Obviously, there's a lot of child abuse that gets that becomes part of the because of the anger, because of the frustration. A lot of verbal abuse starts going at home, physical abuse starts at home. Another thing that's happening is that teens, I don't know about your countries, but in the United States, teens are almost getting access to alcohol and drugs, definitely marijuana and more drugs, and Xanax and all of the other pills very early in their life, like almost around age 13, 14. Now they're pretty much have access to all of them. And then when they're home, they have access to home bar. So, they'll go pick it up and then pour water in it. So they think that their parents don't know. I get all of that in the sessions when I talk with teens of how they've done it. So and they're bored. Obviously I'm bored is one of the things that teens usually say. Now imagine they're really bored at this time. So the usage of marijuana pills that they get from their parents' pharmacy and alcohol has gone a lot. So there's a lot of fight in here where sometimes they deny, they have fight about parents wanting to prove that they're using. There's a lot of rage that is happening and a lot of threat about teenagers wanting to move out, which they can't. So you could also find those types of fights a lot that is happening with the children. And then the younger children are always they become part of this fight that is there. The relationship with elders, right? They're more vulnerable. They get more scared. I was talking to my husband's mother, who's about 80 and lives alone. And she said, I have no idea, but I get so much more scared. She can't go out. Nobody can go to her home. Everybody goes in and puts the food beside. So for elderly, this has become the worst possible scenario, especially the ones that live alone. The elderlies who are living within the same system, not much might have to change for them. It's just that they have the fear of, the younger kids who still are going out and coming back, or somebody in the home goes and work and come back. They're having the fear of really infecting them. But besides that, the ones who are living and isolated, which in the United States, we have more of that. And I don't know about your other countries about whether elderly are together or not. They also have a lot more of fear of morbidity because they have other conditions always. And the fear of mortality, of dying, is right in front of their face because the news constantly is saying how many people are dying, and most of them are elderly. So hearing this news freaks them out. Like at any point, if somebody's around, that they might think that they're going to come back from work, the fear of I'm going to die is going to be there. So you remember I said the hyper alertness of you have a headache and no, oh my God, I'm going to get it. Now imagine an elderly with that type of a hypersensitivity about their body, because most of the elderly, they're not working, they're not paying attention to anything else except their body on a regular basis, at all time. This place is painful. So now imagine that being heightened. So level of depression has gone sky high. Anxiety has gone sky high. They can't sleep at night, even with the medicines. They're feeling very, very vulnerable. And that's a group to really have to be taken care of. And most of the issues to be taken care of is finding ways to entertain them in different ways for the family to try to entertain them. So it's more like distraction. The more you could do for your elderly to distract them is what I found that you could do, because the rest of it, there's not much except, for them to take more medication to distract them, which is not really good for them in that way anyway. Friends and family, one of the biggest losses that people have is to be social with their friends. So obviously they go into virtual parties, they go into outdoor, like camping together parties. We have a book club. Like yesterday, they showed us that everybody was sitting in a backyard and everybody with a mask with a 6 feet space together, talking together. But there's insisting to be together now, especially with the, with all that's happening, there's a need to be together. There are new rules for socialization, such as, having to be 6 feet apart, really doing it outside is bringing new ways. Now, new etiquettes for gatherings are getting created, because I have one client where the couple started really fighting because the husband really wants to go and to the neighbors' houses and sit outside. And the woman is really freaked out and says, well, we have two elderly grandparents who live with us. So I cannot find out if we go to the neighbor's house, what's going to happen to us. The other side of the etiquette, so this is a part of the conflict, but the other side of the etiquette, she said, I can promise that I can put a mask. I can promise to not go to their bathroom. And if I want to go to the bathroom, go to my house. But I can't discipline adults which are in there, which they take their masks off, which they keep coming close to me, which I have to go through a person's house in order to get there, and it's not my place to discipline another adult. And then they get into confrontation if that's what they have to do. So we're finding there's new ways of socialization and etiquettes that people have to figure out together if they wanted to, because some people are more sensitive to this. Some people are more rebellious, like, I don't have to, I don't care, I don't want to wear a mask, I want my freedom, who's there to tell me? So you can see really on a social level, we're adjusting to a whole different way as we're going back into the system of wanting to socialize with each other and come out of this type of place. And then negatively judging each other because we have to set new boundaries. On an existential level, the emotions that I've really seen experience with a lot of my clients and myself pretty much is a lot of grief and loss, especially for people who actually lost people. I have one client who lost four people in her vicinity. She lost her mother, she lost two of her brothers in Iran at the same time, and a cousin. And they couldn't go, and all of it because of the COVID-19, and they couldn't go. They actually could not go to the back to the country. They could not actually go and to a funeral. I have people right now which their friends and family are in the hospital, and after they died, they couldn't actually go see their family member or have a funeral for them. So the grief and loss is huge for people in order to see what. Now, even with people who have not had any members of their family pass away, the grief of the way they used to live, the grief of the job they had, the identity they had, the socialization they had. There's, the beautiful restaurants they used to go, the freedom of all of that. It creates a lot of grief and loss. There's a sense of lack of security, especially in a way that, a lot of robberies have gone up. They think that if you live in a society that there's going to be a lot of lack of job and lack of finances, that there's always this fear that you're going to have looters, you're going to have robberies, you're going to have people who are in need who might come and take it from you. So people are having a fear about that. There's a loss of safety because of obviously the disease itself, anxiety, emptiness, depression, tremendous amount of powerlessness against this, and a hopelessness about what's going to happen since nobody really has any answers. The isolation that has happened, the sense of responsibility, and I think it's a sense of responsibility is more of the sharing of, am I responsible for getting you infected? How am I responsible for handling my life, which will be also an effect of the society, or I take on complete lack of responsibility about this. And then the matter of control. Am I in control? What part I am in control and what part I'm not? And most of the people feel very out of control in this sense at this point. And they're trying to figure out what areas they have control. On a spiritual level, I think a lot of people, because they don't know what's going on, they'll go attach themselves into their faith. People who are going, need their religion and coming back in that societies, sometimes they have that support so they can move themselves out. If they can, and support, for us as therapists to support them to constantly come back into their centeredness, meditation, teach them even meditation techniques, or there are a lot of apps out there to support them to go toward that, learning meditation, connecting with their body, connecting with everybody else, connecting with their God, with their soul, creating a purposefulness, because a lot of people at this point, they don't feel like they have that type of a purpose. Feeling of gratitude with what they have, with the health they do have, with the setup that they have in life, and the more that they can come back into that sense of gratitude, that it supports them, to bring them a sense of peacefulness and fulfillment in a sense. This is a place that we could really support people coming after they're going through anxiety, their state of being, how they think about themselves and their belief systems. This is a place where we could really tune in looking at how their belief system has worked for them. And if there is a belief system that doesn't work, maybe we could shift that for them. Their emotionality, their behavior, how it impacts themselves and their life and others, bringing them to the intentionality of how they can be and how they can work. If they're not in control of half of the stuff, what is it that they are in control of and they can do, and how they can co-create the state of the present moment, and then co-create the vision of the future, so they can manifest it and create it for the future. These are suggestions that I've worked this way, so I'm just sharing it with you. So at the beginning, it would be that definitely assessment of the area of need. I have found that when I have clients who are really life hasn't really changed, except that they have to stay home. They have a beautiful home. They brought all of their family together and stayed together for 2 months. Their financial piece hasn't really changed. And so their way of dealing with this, it's more a personal way of finding their space and reconnection. And many of these people, although they don't like what's happening, but they're finding themselves. They're actually getting pleasure out of redefining who they are in this space, while it's like a mandatory shutdown, and they have an excuse to stay home together. But for somebody who lost their job, somebody who's in a domestic violence relationship, for somebody who doesn't have food to put in front of their kids, those are so much different. So assessment of the area of need at this point is very important. Watching for addiction, alcohol, and drug use and abuse, which has gotten heightened because obviously of anxiety, and how that impacts the whole system and the whole family is important for that assessment. If we need to give a referral source, for example, psychiatrist or AA meetings or any type of a resource, or even food banks, or financial places that they can go get some money, anywhere that we could create those referral sources out of that assessment. If we see that there's crisis, this is the time to look at the crisis and figure out with them how to manage specific crisis at that moment. Then to teach them emotional regulation techniques, which they can calm themselves down, anxiety management techniques, anger management techniques, stress reduction techniques, healthy communication techniques. And I think that at this point, although I'm a very much of a person who works in a deep level with people, but in this time, because it's a shift and uncertainties and maybe a lot of crisis, what I found is utilizing more of a solution focused interventions and brief therapy interventions have really worked to bring people into some sort of balance first. Obviously, if there's a chance and time, we could do that more often, go deeper with that. Awareness intervention model is a model I created about 10 years, and we've done a lot of studies. And, if people are interested, we'll do a whole different presentation on it, which is eclectic, it's client-centered, it's structured, open. It's a brief session. It's considered brief, but in some of the phases, it really goes deep and goes in through an integration process of all the memories that you have from the childhood. So it has 6 phases, and the phase 1, 2, 3, it really concentrates on the present moment of relating from yourself to others, or projections of others toward yourself, and then relatedness of the self toward the self. And then you have the integration phase, which is going to the past, looking at all the memories, all the belief systems and core beliefs, and then coming into intentionality, and then maintenance. And this is the way you can find me. This is the book that's also, it's like a self-help book that I wrote that has all the exercises for the awareness integration path. And those are my ways to contact me. And I would really love it if you connect with me and subscribe to my YouTube channel and other like LinkedIn or Facebook and all of that, so I can also be in contact with you. So now if we can open, I can cancel all the mute so we could, or whomever wants to, we could, you know, show a sign of your hand so we could open this conversation to be together and hear from you. So I can unmute everybody.
Okay, now I can hear you.
Okay, good.
I had to join my audio, so.
All right, beautiful. It's nice to see you. Okay, I have Shanti.
Hi.
Hi, hold on. Go ahead. Or are you still mute? I think you muted yourself. There you go.
All right. Hi, Shanti again from Barbados. Thank you so much, firstly, for the presentation. I found it quite informative and quite reflective of what it is going on here in Barbados as well. I think one of the last points that you made struck me in that it's important, regardless of our orientation and our methodology in practice, to do something that helps the client to get to a space of functionality quickly. I find in terms of our culture in the Caribbean and in Barbados, persons are not very open to perhaps 3 or 4 session intakes. You know, that may be what we're trained to do, spend 3 or 4 hours or over weeks doing the intake session and whatever. Our culture is if you come into the therapy space and after the first session you don't have anything to take away, most of the time persons do not come back. So we have had to kind of amend even the intake sessions and the assessment sessions to make sure they have something to take away in order for them to come back and receive the depth of intervention that they need. But for sure, in this time, I have had to also rework my technique and the things that I do, a lot more solution focused, a lot more brief therapy, to make sure that they are at least getting to a point where they can function. And then if there's need for anything further, then we work on that as time goes by. So I just wanted to highlight that. And again, thank you so much for the presentation.
Thank you. I definitely, thank you for sharing with us what's going on with in Barbados. And I do agree that no matter what happens, I think our duty as a therapist is when somebody comes in to find out what their needs are and bring them specifically into a homeostasis and a balanced position where they can function what's going on. To be honest with you, even though like in United States, there's also this concept of different theoretical bases and brief therapy, even with the concept of insurances is something between 6 session to 12 session. But most of the research shows that about 90% of people who go to therapy, they do a 1 session therapy anyway. And they might come back to you, like even if they really liked you, they might come back in the next level. So they still, a lot of places, they deal with psychotherapy as a medical model, which is you go to a doctor, you have a problem, you want your solution, you want to go home. It's not like I got to come to you for a lifetime, like a psychoanalysis. So even on a normal level, I think this model of a one-time deal or a medical model is still something that people are searching for. And I know the way we learn it is different because we all obviously want to dig in and go and do all of that. But I guess we're here for our clients, so we got to go based on what their needs are. Who would like to speak? You want to raise your hand or raise your virtual hand? Or I can unmute everybody. Sometimes there's a noise pollution when I unmute everybody. Hi, Josephine. You have muted yourself, so you got to unmute yourself if you want to talk.
I had unmuted myself. that was a wonderful presentation. First of all, I'm Josephine from Kenya.
Hi.
Yeah, I'm a practicing psychologist. I see clients in my personal practice for the last 10 years.
Wonderful.
Yeah, so just like you said, I think Shanti also mentioned the same. We have a challenge where you find clients come to us with a mindset, you know, like the way you get a headache and you want to go get some painkillers and you just go home. So in my practice, I've seen patients who come, of course, they come with their caregivers and they're not the ones putting up the bill. So you hear that you can see them for like a session or two and they are done. So I've seen that challenge, especially here in being, we're in a developing, a third world country. And it becomes very difficult, especially for us professionals, to really show them how important it is to walk the journey with them. Yeah. So I don't know if in other countries we have these kind of challenges. Yeah. Otherwise, Daktari, that was a very good presentation. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Josephine. Thank you for being with us. And I love to hear from others in what it is that goes into their country. I know in the United States, I've been a therapist for almost 30 years. And in these 30 years, it's been very different, where at the beginning, it was that people will come in because they want to work on themselves. And I think some people come in because of crisis, and some people come in because they really want to work on themselves. So there are two different groups for doing that. And then you have the population, which is not paying out of pocket. So they have a service which is being provided for them. So on those level, you might find, depending on the culture of the family, you might find that they will continue, sessions with you. But people who are paying out of pocket, I also saw that if the fees are lower, they will come in and they pay out of pocket if they have the culture that they could value from you and the space of therapy, as if it's a brainstorming concept. Like they have, it's a safe place for them, which they can come every week or every other week and see themselves and be for themselves. And if they have the luxury or the philosophy of doing that, then they will continue. But the percentage are very low. Most of the people still come to therapy as if they, the medical model, they're going to come in with an issue. They want you to give them techniques for that issue, give them something, and they will go away. One thing that I've noticed, and that's why I created also that structured model for the therapy for awareness integration, was people will come in with the symptomology. We would support them, give them some techniques for that symptomology, and then they will come back and they're like, I don't know what else to talk about. Like, I want to come, but I don't even know what else to talk about. And then the therapists, we're trained to kind of like, stay and figure out what they want. And sometimes it's like, okay, I can't figure out what to talk about, so bye-bye. So when I noticed that, well, there's a lot of different pieces which comes from their childhood or the way they relate to other people, I created the structure, which is at the beginning, I share with them, I said, we could, I want to hear you and I want to give you the presenting problem that you're coming in. I want to give you something. But I also want to tell you that when we finish with this presenting problem, there's so many areas of your life, such as your intimate relationship, your relationship with people, friends, family, and career, finances, your childhood issues, you're dealing with your body, your self-image, death, nature, all of that. Those are all there for us to deal with, because if you have the opportunity, the philosophy, the finances, or the know-how to do it, then, this is an opportunity for you to get cleaned inside and really get trained in how to, observe yourself and move. Sometimes I've noticed when there's a path to it, which I offer it to them, they'll continue. They're like, oh, that's exciting. Okay, now I'm going to do that. Because now they have a path that they know what's to do. And the concept of the responsibility is not on the shoulder of the client to come in with the next issue. Because at one point they don't know what their next issue is until the crap really, hits them into their face. Before that, they don't know what the issue is. They can't see in the next level of it. So that, what I've noticed, is helpful. Where at the beginning, even the first session, we let them know that I honor what you're coming, and I know this is important for you, and I want to do that. But after we're finished with this, I just wanted you to know that we have all of these other areas that we could work on. And I do that at the end of the first session, where I give them some things, and then because I've heard and kind of have formulated a little bit in my head about where these things might have come from. Like maybe it is different versions of things in their intimate relation, or maybe it's a belief system that came from their childhood. Maybe it was a trauma that they shared about the childhood. So because I get that, a little bit of that in the assessment, at the end of the first session, that's how I would formulate for them, which is, I would love to work with you for a couple of sessions about this. And then anytime you're ready, just letting you know that these are all the other pieces that we can also work whenever you're ready. And I've noticed that sometimes people come in and actually say, okay, I'm ready for the next session now, like the next series. That might help if that works. Anybody wants to share? Raise your hand and unmute yourself, I guess, because most of you, I think you've unmuted yourself. I share your hand sign now. Hold on. Josephine, did you? Oh, there you are. Go ahead. Go ahead.
Yeah. I truly appreciate this interaction. Now, when I think we are in very different backgrounds in terms of countries, but I think as therapists, as professionals, we all play on the same field, same games. Everything is the same. Okay, so I have cases here of say like right now I'm there's a lot of mental health issues in our country because of the COVID-19, even before. But in this country, therapy has not been fully embraced. And sometimes you find where parents feel that they can be able to help their children. And when they bring their teenagers for therapy, you find that they really want to get involved. Now, I have a case that I'm handling, and I'm seeing this girl tomorrow, 18-year-old. The mother is very busy working in the office, and they're just two. She has two children, this lady. One of the firstborn is already into drugs and alcohol and everything. So that one is a gone case. So she has an 18-year-old who has also started abusing drugs and alcohol. So she did this. Okay, this is how I do it, and I need your advice, Daktari. This is how I do it. Like when I see the children, I always have sessions with the parents or the caregivers so that we can work as a team. We can draw goals on how to be able to help this the patient who is a child. So this mother went to the house after I briefed her that, this girl is abusing marijuana, and please, let's work as a team and see how we can be able to help her so that she doesn't take the same route the brother took. So what this lady did, she went and searched the girl's room and found biscuits, the biscuits that are raised with the marijuana.
Yeah.
And now she called me, she was trembling. Of course, she was so down. This is her last born, and she never thought this girl would take the same route like the brother. And I felt a lot of burden. I felt so burdened trying now to manage the mother's emotions. And I'm seeing this girl tomorrow. I don't know how to handle when parents or caregivers search their children's room and they find drugs. How are we supposed to advise them? Because there's a lot of that in this country.
Yeah. Anybody
Yeah.
want to share their opinion about this?
Sure, I guess provide a little bit of insight.
Please.
So let me see. Is my camera not on? You know, it's so impersonal sometimes you can't see someone.
Yeah, you don't. We don't have your. We have your picture, but we don't have you live.
Okay.
There you
Maybe
are.
no. Hi.
Hi.
Okay. So the first thing I think that I wanted to comment on is kind of like the fact that as clinicians, oftentimes we do think and we want to value each one of our professions in the same way. And I think that comes from a place of attempting to not offend other professionals. But I think the first thing that we have to do is clinically, we have to be sound and we have to be cognizant of the fact that we aren't all the same practitioners. So because we're all in the field of psychology and psychotherapy doesn't mean that we're all created equally as far as like what the consumers are getting from us. Um, so that's the first piece. Secondly, the assessment, I think, because someone else talked about the assessment process. I think it was Shanti. So the assessment process with one clinician, let's say they're going to a psychologist assessment should be anywhere between 2 hours to 3 hours, depending on what type of psychometrics interventions they're delivering. But if they're going to a psychotherapist, that's a therapist clinician, and that means that their educational housing is from a therapy platform, then they're going to get something that's more in depth. If they're going to a counselor, they're going to get advisement, typically coping strategies, unless that counselor is also cross-trained on therapeutic interventions. So therapeutic interventions are typically trauma-informed, and go beyond the scope of just exploring issues and advisement. I missed your presentation, so I don't know what you covered already, but I wanted to start off by saying those things because I think it's really important, because if we as clinicians don't recognize our value, what our specialties are supposed to be, we're doing an injustice to the consumer because we can't do proper. And I think it's a lot to do with why some people have dropout rates that are higher than others in this field, because we're not necessarily doing justice to the field that we're in. It's also why a lot of people, when they're deciding to go into this field, it's why they're confused when they're doing their research, because we're not doing a good job at providing insight as to what we're supposed to be doing as professionals. So social workers are sometimes clinicians, sometimes they are clinical social workers, but they're still resource and linkage and connections, right? They're going to go over, of course, they're going to go over what you're going to get from a psychiatrist, psychologist, psychotherapist, because they're the ones that are supposed to advocate for the patient as well. And so when we talk about mental health assessments and we're talking about what they're coming in for, and we're aligning them with certain diagnoses, I think the first thing is, cultural competency. So just because we're from that same culture doesn't mean that they share the same cultural or subcultural values that we share. And we have to be able to let the consumers give us what they're needing in that first. We're supposed to be doing an assessment regardless of what epistemology you may be in, but let them give you what it is that they need. And when you're going through cultural indicators, and if you guys don't have an assessment that includes that, I can send it over for free. But when you're going over those cultural indicators, you're covering things that you need to be addressing as phase of life issues, which brings me to your question. So some things are phase of life issues. And so it's up to us as the professionals in the room to normalize some of those things, but help them move into a place of acceptance and then commitment to do something a little bit different than what they've been doing for their own personal wellness and personal emotional and mental health, so that the behaviors in the system can ripple and change. Obviously, I'm a systemic practitioner, right? So that's how you accomplish the systemic change. So if you change one element of the system, the rest of the system has no choice but to change. It's like a machine. That's what family systems are about. Everybody has an intricate role to play. Even in systems where you have extreme drug usage, right? Those particular people who struggle with whatever addiction they're struggling with, they have a function in the family system. If they stop, talked about, is it
Foojan.
Foojan? Okay, so Foojan mentioned earlier her desire to bring people to a homeostatic place to help them balance out their system. When they come to us, what's happening is something in their system, either their internal system or their externally connected system, is struggling with a homeostatic state of being. And so if we're going to bring them balance, we have to address what things have changed, erupted in your life recently, or precipitating factors that you feel like contribute to this new display of symptoms. And then we're addressing for them not just the symptom management, but response oriented management. So we're talking about, okay, so how did you respond before? What are things you did before to manage anxiety, depression, seeing images in the distance that you were sure other people didn't see, things like that. So we're exploring those things and we're finding out how these things stop working for them. And then when we're talking about substance use, we know that studies tell us, we all function in a society where social comparison theory is always at play, regardless of which country we're in, because it's the nature of humanity. We're looking at what the next person is doing, and that's what we pretty much evaluate our life on. In places where you see there is heavy set religion guiding the culture, shaping the people, you see even more deviant behavior, because why? They're being forced by some other sector other than internal system to do a particular thing, to be a particular way, while each person is going through an extenuating growth process, as we continue the life cycle. And so we have to affect the way we're responding to those things that typically exacerbate or, create those symptoms for us. And so when you were talking about feeling sorry for the mom, that transference is normal, because we think to ourselves, like, what would I do if, and so you sit in that space and you explore, like, what exactly are you feeling right now? Ask that question. Where do those feelings come from? What do you feel like those feelings come from? Because the thing is, the more we explore with them what they're feeling, and of course where those feelings are coming from, the more they will see that it's their personal perfection and personal biases that is preventing them from seeing the directionality in which that other person in their system is growing. We have to help them understand homeostasis. We have to help them understand the family system growth process, what the life cycle of families look like. We need to have them understand what it looks like for an individual to achieve their personal autonomy and differentiation from their family of origin. That's our job as clinicians, if we're in that space for healing in that moment. Now, if you're a counselor, because I don't know everybody's, different area, then we're basically giving them interventions that they can use to help them move into a place of acceptance. So radical acceptance coping skills. We can talk to them about that. We can provide them with the manual. We can walk them through it. And eventually it becomes therapeutic in and of itself, because they're able to notice where their biases are coming from, and they can see it before it comes. And as it comes closer, they can move it to the side and say, no, this is their stuff and this is my stuff. Yes, I'm entitled to my feelings and my opinions about their life, but those particular things, my entitlements are not supposed to be directly impacting their life, because their part of the system has to be able to function in and of itself. So if I am at the top of the simple machine and their position is somewhere in the middle, I cannot be at the top and still be in the middle at the same time. You understand? So it has to do with understanding what your position in the family system is. So if you want the system to run smoothly, you have to be able to function in your capacity. Allow those people to function in their capacity. And you have to understand what it looks like for a child to go through adolescent egocentrism as they approach early adulthood. You know, from the age of 15 all the way through 19, that phase of life is when you no longer have a place of importance. So a lot of the things that you might get from your child might be half truths, no truths at all, depending on how they learn to value you and your insight in that moment. You're going to see them become who they are becoming, because they're shaping their independent, autonomous personalities at that point. And if they're too dependent on you, then you create space for codependency types of disorders, because that's where that comes from. So hopefully that helps.
Yes, thank you so much. Anyone else that would like to join and have a respond to Josephine? I mean, I have, but I don't want to, I want everybody to have a share. No? All right, I'll share. Josephine, I have a lot of conversations that shows up for me when it comes to young adult using drugs and alcohol, and then what happens in their family system. And Dr. Jefferson said it beautifully, so I'm just gonna kind of like build on some other areas. I think that sometimes when I give one intervention to the parents to do, it doesn't fit the system that they've already created. So somehow I also try to find out what type of a system they have been using. For example, I look at what does boundary mean in that system. Like sometimes they say, you know, the kid comes in and says, you have no right to go to my room. But if the boundaries are always meshed in that family, then even the conversation of you have no right to go into my room does not make sense anymore. Because if everybody's into each other's system and have been in each other's system for a while, then somehow that becomes part of the system. I think the system gets weird if you're pretending that we have boundaries, but then you cross it. So if I'm pretending that, you know, you have your room and these walls and what happens in that room is yours, and then I come in when you're not there to, you know, sneak in, then that's where it becomes disrespectful. But if the boundary of the household, which some of the family systems have it, which is like, hey, this house is mine because I pay for it, and anything that happens in this house, I am responsible for, and you are underage, so whatever happens to you legally, I'm responsible for, and I'm not going to go through something that you think you can do whatever and I have to pay the price. Then I own this whole house and I can go anywhere I like. So, and I'm not saying that one is better than the other. I'm just saying, what does the system look like? You know, is it an authoritarian system, or is it a loose system, or is it a system that is really underneath authoritarian but pretends to be a democratic system within that, you know, concept? And is it like when the father would be the authoritarian, which does everything but frightens people, the kids, and then the mother is the one that kind of like, you know, fixes things? And then now there's the mother who went and found this, but now wants to do something where, you know, she's always been the savior of the kids. Now she's going to be the disciplinarian. So then it becomes a kind of like a betrayal for the kid. So I think knowing what the system looks like would support you in how to give an intervention to the mother. And the other piece is also, for example, I give clients, I see a lot, I'm originally from Iran, but I've done all my practice in the United States. So I also work with a lot of Iranians, and even people call me from Iran or other places. And you can see that, for example, in the United States, I can give an intervention that would work because the society around that family operates in a particular level. So if in the United States, I say, you know, you let your young one know that as long as they're underage and they choose to live in this household, that this household, like any other space, has rules. And the rules of this household is no drug use, which means the parents cannot be using drugs either, because you can't create a rule for the rest of the family and not use it yourself. And if the child says, well, and I've had this, well, teen says, I'm just not going to live here anymore, I'm going to walk out. But I know that if in this country, if the person walks out, you can always have the police bring them back, because that's what the law is. So you can say, you're more than welcome if you like, you'd live wherever you like. I just want you to know that the law says that under the age of 18, you still, you know, they're going to come and take you either to group home or they'll bring you back home, because that's what the law says. So depending on what the laws are and the societies are, I think that the parents will have some notion of how to bring some sanity in this conversation, which sometimes it goes out of reality. Like a child says, I'm just going to go live with a friend. It's up to you, whatever you like. I don't know how long you're going to, you know, the other family is going to keep you on their couch. But I know, for example, in an Iranian community back home, if your neighbor's son says, I want to live, you know, they kick me out and I'm coming to your house, the society will kind of keep you, you know, they won't kick you out. The society, the village will hold you. So then that doesn't work. Does that make sense? So it's or like the society is that if my child goes, I'm living in a neighborhood that immediately a drug dealer will have another soldier and they'll pick him up and take him, and it's worse. So it really also depends on not only the family system, but also the surrounding society, because this child is now, they're not 2, 3, or 4. They're having access to a society that they're getting close. So the knowledge of that is so important when you want to give that concept. So maybe asking the mother, what are their fears? What is it that's going to happen? What if the child goes away? What if they take such a boundary that the child says, I don't want to live here. Screw you, I'm leaving. Which is their worst scenario that they think about. If you access all of those fears so that you know that the intervention that you're giving, and then if the mother does, what kind of consequences does the mother or the whole system of the family has to face? And in that way, then you can adjust how much of the boundaries they can set. I've also worked with mothers that it doesn't matter how many boundaries I show them to do, they'll do it once, but they won't follow through with the boundary. So what's the point of saying one boundary and then on the second level not do it? Or I've watched, you know, for example, the teenager utilizing anger and rage, and this is my house, this is my room, get out of my room. You have no, reason to, you have no way that you don't trust me, and how dare you not trust me? And sometimes it's more like just coming back, well, I don't trust you because you haven't shown me that I could trust you. And trust is something you need to earn. And the child might turn around and say, well, you do it yourself. And yeah, and then you might have to be prepared to come clean with some things that you have and apologize for some things that you have done in order to gain their trust, and then request for them to gain your trust. So there's all of these things that happens where one intervention might depend on all of your assessment of what has happened with them. Usually on where I want to get, like the client is here, where I want to get as a therapist with them as a goal. And then these are all the ways that we go, all the roads that we have to take until then. And I even share that with a client where, what is the ultimate beautiful concept that you want? Because ultimately for me, it might be that I wish that the whole world will be sober, but that might not be the idealistic and realistic concept of that family. So sometimes I've asked, like, what is your ideal situation? If it all worked out, what would it look like? And, the parents might just say to me, like, well, the ideal work would be that they're not addicted, but it's okay that they use sometimes. Okay. So working with the ideal of what the vision of that woman is, because she can only work through her own ideal unless her ideal is unrealistic. And then, you challenge that ideal first so she can come to a realistic sense, and then taking the vision that she has and, putting it in a mark. Like, well, if this is your ideal and this is your goal for your relationship with your son, then what would be the first thing we could do right now? What can you create within a week? What can you create within 2 weeks? And kind of systematize it that way for her, so she knows that this is something she can do. Because sometimes we give interventions and they're like, I can't do that. I've even said like normal sentences, healthy sentences to people. Can you share with your child like this? Sometimes I, for example, they'll tell mothers and families that when your child becomes around age 13, buy, and I don't know where you go, in the United States, you could buy from any of the drugstores drug tests. And I suggest buy a drug test, wrap it around in for their birthday, and say, put it in and say, this is going to be your best friend for the next 5-6 years that we live together, because I don't want to disrespect you and come and check everything. And I don't want to be disrespectful to you in that way. So therefore, I'm going to offer you this, and know that randomly I will, check with you in what it is. And sometimes it will be that I would like that. And, you may say yes, you may say no, and, we'll work it through. Most of the time when I say this intervention to them, they look at me like, I can't say that. And then we look at, okay, well, what do you do usually? Same thing. I'll just wait until one day he comes home high, and then I'm going to go check. And then when you find, what are you going to say? I don't know. So we go walk through this to find out what is it that they can do as a preventive measure as they're coming home. But if there's something happens, then, how is it in their culture, family culture, to communicate that piece with them, with your child, so that you could have the relationship move forward and not sever. We've also had people, between the father and the mother, or another sibling, which in this case, the older sibling already is addicted, to come in and, play the good cop and bad cop somehow. Like one holds the space as a nurturing, another person becomes the systematic disciplinarian, so that, they have someone they have someone who's holding their hand while they're having someone else, which is the system of the family already as a disciplinarian, holds it, but not into placating it, not into, for example, if a disciplinarian, because sometimes if there's a disciplinarian, the family, and then the other parent advises against it, like, it's okay, I'll hold a secret for you. Like, it's okay if you use, I'll hold a secret, I won't tell your dad what's going on. That becomes really detrimental to the system. But if for example, the mother is holding the child, where I know it's, tell me what's going on, if you need, if you're anxious, if you need something for me to support you in order for us to move forward, while maybe like another person of the system is holding a little bit more of the disciplinarian, where no, there's no way that you could use, and this and that. So that might also shift the powers, if you don't want your child just to kind of like run away or feel betrayed. Addiction is one of the, and I don't know what resources you guys have, because sometimes we need, like in the United States, I bring other resources in. I'll bring interventionists in. I'll bring, a person who is, who can connect to the young adult or the teenager. For example, if it's a male, we'll bring another male counselor who is concentrates only on addiction, and get them connected to the teen, because they have a different bond versus, for example, me as a female, older, they're going to have a transference of a mother to me, so they won't really connect with me. But if I bring a younger male counselor who's more, into addiction, they may connect together and bring them in that section. So, utilize other resources for the kid itself. And I hope that was helpful. Yeah, your voice is open.
Okay, thank you. Thank you so much for Jan. I think I forgot to, that was quite insightful, right? I forgot to mention that this is it's a very dysfunctional family because they are separated, the parents are separated, and the mother is with the two children. We had checked the older child into a rehab a couple of months ago. Now, the father is far away in a different city, and what the mother was telling, this lady was telling me yesterday was, the father is watching so that for these kids to lives to get destroyed, so that he can blame the mother, right? So it is very complicated, very, very complicated. The other, as you digest that, when a parent goes into a child's room, like this 18-year-old girl, and finds drugs or alcohol or whatever it is, like in this case, the mother found biscuits that were raised with weed or marijuana. How should they approach it? Should they confront the child, or they should, because like now she's telling me that this girl should come tomorrow, that is now tomorrow, to come and see me for a session. So what is the mother supposed to do? She has gone ahead, she has checked the room, and she has found this. And she is checking after my discussion with her, you know what? This is what we have at hand, and this is what we need to do. We need to work as a team to help this girl. So what she did is she went and searched the room, and she found these drugs. So she was asking me, how should I approach? Should I ask her? What should I do?
I don't see any reason for searching if you're not willing to put it out. What's the point? What's the point of me searching where I'm not willing to, kind of bring it out? And I would shift it from confrontation. I would shift it into inquiry. That now I think the most thing that she would have, the concept of boundary I was saying is, if the girl, if the teen is used to the mother going and cleaning her room, then it's more like, yeah, I was cleaning your room, I was doing all of that, and this is what I came up with. But if that's not a culture in that family, and that room has always been closed off, and suddenly she goes in, then she has to say what it is that she decided, why is it that she decided to go? It could be that I saw some behaviors from you that enticed me because I wanted to know why I was there. I guessed that you might be using drugs, and therefore I decided to go search. That's why I decided to go search. And, this is what I found. So now I'm putting it out there and creating inquiry. What are these? And how come, since when? You have, not as an accusation or not as a police interrogation, but really from a curiosity place, that I love you and I want your best. And this is, as I'm coming and finding this, it's kind of, I'm inquiring about, share with me what's going on in your life. How long have you been using? How come you've been using? What are your process? What is that your intentionality? And come up with a dialogue that two people can have, so that the mother, instead of being afraid, and I get it that the mother is also projecting a lot on the father, like, oh, the father is standing there waiting for this. So she could be more really just coming from fear, and maybe rightly so, but based on what she's going through. But based on that too, but look at this human being that is in front of you, which is your teenager. They need you, and they don't want to be scolded. They've done something, so it's more like loving. I care for you. However, then, as the tough love kind of, I love you. However, these are some of the issues that we need to look at. And it's not okay with me that you're using, and it's not okay with me that you're going to do that. So what can we come together, and how would it be from tomorrow? What are your promises? How can I support you? And if you need something, I can support you to, get a counselor for you, or you can go to therapy. any way that I can support you, I'll be there for you. But what are your promises to me, and how can we, support each other to pass through this time? Instead of like this confrontation of, what are you doing? How come you're doing this? Da, 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 da. Because that's anybody where you go with that type of a confrontation, they're going to freeze. So you close off the way that you would, connect with them. I think Shanti wants to say something.
Yes, I just wanted to agree in terms of the approach that you're speaking of. I think a lot of it depends on, again, the culture of the family, and perhaps the relationship that the mother had with the daughter previously, whether they were able to sit and have conversations together, or whether there was conflict before, whether the, as you explained, the room was always open so the mother would be in and out of the room, or whether it was a closed space. All of those things will make a difference in how the conversation is started and how it continues with the daughter. The other thing that came to mind is that sometimes we have clients who, although we point them to particular resources, they still want us to tell them specifically what it is that they are to do. And it takes the responsibility off of them in terms of the decision making, so that they're then able to say, well, this counselor said this to me and I did exactly that and it did not work. And I don't know about your dynamics in your locations, but for sure, in terms of the Barbadian culture, that's something that we have to be really careful about and aware of, because they're generally looking for somebody else to blame. It's more of a blaming culture than I'm taking responsibility for my own actions and my own situation. So we tend to have to try to make sure that we point them towards many options, many resources, as is being said here right now, as opposed to telling them this is what you are to do. Because it just shifts the responsibility onto us as opposed to onto them. And that's how they tend to go through life.
Thank you. I think LaQuinda, I think you're muted yourself. If you like to share, because you have put in things on the chat. Would you like to just share yourself? Dr. Jefferson?
Myself?
No, Dr. Jefferson.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I was in the process of talking to my daughter. But so what I was saying is, why not approach it from, so I do a lot of conflict communication because I'm a marriage and family therapist. So my specialty is trauma, families, couples, individuals, things like that. But so I have, I guess, a complex view on when it comes to situations where, as a parental subsystem, you're not coming from a place of support initially. You're coming from a place of defense, because especially in divorcing families, like you talked about, you see a lot of blame and a lot of placation. You see that because people do not feel comfortable living in and speaking in and walking in their truth just yet, because they always feel like the other person is looking to judge them. So when they're having issues with their kids, the first thing you have to address is the parental subsystem. The second thing you want to address is the individuals as they approach the child, because she's no longer a child, she's a developing young adult. And so understanding how they view their offspring is the first thing. And then when you create space for them to communicate and navigate this, okay, I found this in your room, and I'd like to know more about where how you're developing, what your exposures look like, because these are things that you should be curious about as a parent, but oftentimes we miss the fact that we should be curious about those things because of the reasons I just mentioned before, the divorcing parent situation, feeling like you're going to be ridiculed and judged for supporting them. But you have to do so in a way that you're creating space for safe communication. This is something that I've been dealing with. After I found this, I was just, I was a little bit shaken because I realized that I've been viewing you as your adolescent you. as your child you. And I forgot to take into account that you were growing, shaping, evolving. So now I'm curious about what this means for you. You know, because at the end of the day, the mom found these things, but it's not a guarantee that it belongs to the child. But what we want to discuss is, where is this taking us? Where is this from? And I'm curious to know more about you and your exposures, because if you're changing, I understand that a lot of people right now are experiencing with drugs and, okay, Shanti, I was reading her message, but experimenting with drugs and, you know, recreational substances and things like that for a host of reasons. I want to understand that if your friends, if you are experimenting with it, what do you think it's doing for you? What benefit is it providing for you? But just from a place of curiosity. And as a clinician, you can ask those questions, and oftentimes you'll see that modeling behavior, the parents will now start to approach it. But I always say teach to the parents the intervention of conflict communication, because if you teach them in practice, hey, I want to practice something with you guys. I want you to take the speaker role, you to take the listener role. This is your job, because now we're listening to understand each other and not just simply to respond. So if we're listening to understand, we're not putting people in a place of judgment. We want to know what their plight is. We want to understand their plight so that we can see how it fits into the schematics of this new system, this evolving system, the existing system, and what caused us to unbalance. Right? So it's no fault on anybody. We're just seeking to understand what's going on in the system so that we can move to a place of evolution and have some space to improve our outcomes. And so when you're teaching them that, you're letting them know that the speaker has the floor and the other individual has a job to almost semi-play therapist by way of trying to document in their minds what it is that they're receiving. Because sometimes messages are communicated, but they're not received well by the listener. And so when we do that, we're teaching them that, okay, when you're hearing what they're saying, I want you to be bookmarking what you're hearing, because I need you to give it back to them the way that you received the message, and they'll either give you confirmation or clarity. After that, we can move to a response. Once you know you've received the message right. So what that looks like is, hey, I want to know, where these drugs come from in your room. I found them in your room while I was cleaning your room the other day. So as the listener, for once in the life of the child, she's only responsible now for letting her mom know that she heard what her mom said as she gave it to her. She's not giving her a response or an answer, right? So what it does is it automatically decreases the amount of defensiveness that the child would have normally. That's what it does subconsciously, because she's now in a different role. She's not in a responding role, just an understanding and interpretive role, right? So she would give the mom back, okay, what I hear you saying is, you think I'm using drugs, right? And so the mom might receive that and say, no, you didn't get that quite right, because what's happening right now? We're decreasing hostility. Already, they don't even know it. It's happening. And so clarity is taking place. And when we clarify the hostile message, it can't ever be received. And so when she says, now, this is what I really meant. What I really meant is, while I was cleaning your room, she goes into an expansive explanation, right? I was cleaning your room, and then I was like, whoa, what's this? I found this, and I was like, oh, that's what this is. And I was just curious where it came from. And then I thought to myself, like, my child is developing into a young adult. Oh, I wonder if she's doing this, or if her friends are doing this, and how she feels about this. What are her insights around this particular area? And so now the child receives it as, okay, what I hear you now saying is that you're just curious about how I'm shaping into a young adult, and you have some concerns. right? And so the mom might say, yeah, at this point, the child is no longer defensive. And so she looks to you as the clinician and say, okay, is it my turn to respond? And you say, yeah, now you're the speaker, mom is the listener. That conversation has now started to take place and they don't even realize it started to take place. Healing has started to take place and they don't even realize that this is the onset of healing. And they've walked into a space of not only revealing the layers of insecurity, but also getting to a place of more valuable attachment. So not enmeshment, not rigid boundaries, but creating flexibility and growth for their system. The father looking in now develops more respect for the mother and the daughter's relationship. In turn, he'll develop more respect for his relationship with the mother. That's the interesting thing about doing systemic approaches. But I think that having that opportunity to have the mom and daughter connect on that level will also decrease some of her anxiety around, oh, what am I going to do? Some of the sadness around, I failed as a parent, because she'll start to move into a place of acceptance of the fact that her child is no longer a child, she's an individual. You know, and she's being shaped by her experiences in and outside of the primary family system. And now the mom will be informed as to how that's happening. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Beautiful. Thank you so much.
No problem.
I hope that this was useful for everyone, and thank you for participating. We've gone about an hour and 40 minutes, so I think that it's we're in a good place to complete. And again, thank you for being here. I'm going to put this on a YouTube, and then I'll put the link on our IWP WhatsApp, so that everybody can utilize what we was said today, even though they were not able to be here. So take good care. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.